One of the first ever examples of large-scale government throughout history was the Roman Republic from around 400 BC to the Common Era. We see a lot of Roman characteristics in our own US government. For example, there are two consuls that act very similarly to our own president. There is also a Senate made up of patricians that advised the consuls and acted on foreign policy. Laws were voted on and subsequently passed by the people's assemblies. Though there may be major differences, notably the cultural shift between upper and lower classes, the Roman Republic still serves as the basis of today's idea of republicanism. Later in history, during the Enlightenment, more ideas began to surface about how government should be run, and philosophers began to question the governments around the world. The two most influential were the British John Locke and Thomas Hobbes. Locke famously believed in his unalienable rights and preached a more hands-off approach to government compared to Hobbes. He thought that the only purpose of government was to protect civil liberties. Hobbes disagreed with him in some ways. In his Social Contract, he described the purpose of government as to keep humans away from their state of nature, essentially a caveman-like behavior. As such, he preached a more hands-on government, we might even call it oppressive today, and he emphasized security over liberty at almost all costs. In the years since, the government has morphed into many vastly different kinds of rule that fit loosely into several categories. There are too many to explain here, so we will only go into detail about democracy and republics. These are systems characterized by people voting for what they want the government to do and act like. A democracy involves people voting for exactly what they want, and a republic is when people vote for people to represent them and act in government according to their needs. The United States and most countries worldwide use elements of both systems to allow the people to have a fair say in government.
Moving on, I'll be talking about the very roots of American democracy and where they came from. To get a good grip on the formation of our democracy as we know it today, we must first explore our separation from Great Britain. Between 1763 and the Revolution in 1776, the colonists felt as though they were being unfairly treated. This, paired with slow communication and poor direction from the British, resulted in the American Revolution, which the colonists came out of free from British rule in 1783. This is where true arguments for governance first began, with arguably the most important and impactful being that of Federalists, supporters of a constitution, which I happen to agree with, and Anti-Federalists, supporters of the Articles of Confederation. Those who supported the Articles, which kept the states as independent bodies, figured that this was a superior form of governance, largely because it meant that there was no federal government to become overbearing like Great Britain was. Ultimately, the Articles highlighted precisely why a strong government was needed: for better representation of the people, fluid trade, and economic improvements. And as such, the Constitution was written and ratified in 1787. This is an important part of our history that every American should know, because it shows that the balance of our government, as we have come to know and love it, didn't start off that way. It took a lot of time, thinking, and compromise to get where we are now.
Greetings, citizens. It is I, Queen Elizabeth, here to talk to you about your civil liberties and civil rights which are outlined in your Constitution. Now, as a U.S. citizen, the most important document pertaining to your civil liberties and civil rights is the U.S. Constitution, in which they outline the rights given to you as a U.S. citizen. The first 10 amendments of the U.S. Constitution are labeled as the Bill of Rights. These are the most important and basic rights you have as a U.S. citizen. Some of these rights may include the freedom of religion, the press, speech, and assembly, which show up in the First Amendment, or the freedom to bear arms, which show up in the Second Amendment, among many. Among the first 10 amendments which are laid out in the Bill of Rights that are proven to be the most crucial in providing you the independence living in America, there are also many other amendments which add to this the rights you have as a U.S. citizen. These amendments can be used as as ways to repeal actions which can be declared as unconstitutional and against your basic human rights. However, a lot of these amendments are not very agreed upon, thus leading to many arguments. For example, these show up in many Supreme Court cases which we've had throughout American history. There are many important Supreme Court cases in U.S. history which argue against decisions that are deemed unconstitutional and go against the amendments labeled in the Constitution which give you the basic U.S. rights. Some of these Supreme Court cases include Bush v. Gore, which was a Supreme Court ruling in 2000, 5-4, which states that the specific recount of the 2000 presidential election between Al Gore and George Bush in the state of Florida, specifically Leon County, is unconstitutional. Some other examples of important Supreme Court cases include Brown v. Board, Roe v. Wade, and Miranda v. Arizona.
Hello, this is Abraham Lincoln, and now we will move on to some specifics of American administration, focusing on three branches of the federal government: the legislative, executive, and judicial. To start off, I'll talk about the legislative branch. In short, the legislative branch is mainly in charge of making laws. These laws are decided and voted on by the Congress, which is comprised of the Senate and the House of Representatives. In order to pass new legislation, both the House and the Senate must pass the same bill by majority vote, in which case it is sent off to a committee for review and either approved or refused. Next is the executive branch. This branch carries out and enforces laws and includes the vice president, president, and the cabinet. The president can sign legislations into laws or veto bills passed by the Congress. They can also issue executive order, which will help enforce existing laws. The vice president of A serves as the president of the Senate, where they can cast a vote in case of a tie. The cabinet simply advises the president on the best choice of their respective office. Finally, the judicial branch is in charge of interpreting and reviewing laws, as well as making sure they don't violate the Constitution. The U.S. Supreme Court is a vital part of the judicial branch, and the court is made of 9 judges called justices who are nominated by the president and confirmed by the Senate. Their main task is to ensure equal justice under law and interpret the Constitution.
Now, talking about another important aspect of government and civics is political influence. Media coverage, a common agent of socialization, which is something that influences citizen action on political matters, is often different depending on which side of a political spectrum an organization falls on. For example, recent coverage on U.S. involvement in Syria by Fox News has a clear conservative bias, often gatekeeping information and praising certain politicians, while recent coverage of a similar topic by CNN has a clear liberal bias, gatekeeping information of their own and denouncing people that conservatives often support. With this in mind, it is important to note that no one source of media or agent of socialization is completely free of bias or twisted truths. The best thing to do is to self-reflect and see where your own biases lie and try to guide yourself to the truth via multiple forms of intake.
Moving on to something more time relevant is the impact of the Trump presidency on U.S. government and citizens. Foremost, one of the most controversial aspects of the Trump administration is his domestic policy. It saw unprecedented political action like crackdown on political rivals, mudslinging against other politicians, political bailouts for Trump's cronies, and more. Donald Trump has used his powers as president to support his agenda no matter what. Some support this against the system, get what I want mentality, while others see it as blatant destruction of democracy. Regardless, it has made politics much more volatile and warlike on both sides of the political spectrum. This brings us into the most significant aspect of his presidency, increasing polarization. Donald Trump's personality and actions have driven an incredible divide between Americans. As seen on January 6th, debate is not adequate anymore. Political divide between Americans is so bad that violence is now a regular occurrence at our own Capitol building. As of now, the complete impact of polarization is unknown, but it will be further explored under the Biden administration, hopefully entailing a peaceful transfer of power and a calmer America. Thank you for watching.